series of 2022. Can you believe that? I'm so excited that you guys are here. I am just one of your hosts, and my name is Kimberly Broussard.
I'm Nathan Barnaba, co-host of Success Series webinars, and I'm excited to be here. I was telling Kim the other day, I missed our participants and I miss our vulnerable conversations.
And I am Tara Gallup. I will be your producer. So when I am not in front of the camera, you can catch me behind the keyboard, getting to chat and interact with all of you, along with Julie Miller. Now, I want to remind you all that when you are chatting, and we love to hear your feedback and just have you a part of the conversation, make sure that you are typing your chats to everyone instead of to panelists, because we want everyone to hear what you're saying. So make sure it says to everyone before you press send. I'm so excited to get to see you all again today.
I know that you guys can see we have a new format, and we kind of mentioned that in the email that was sent out to you guys, encouraging you to register. So we want to hear your feedback at the end of the workshop to tell us, hey, what you think about the new format? Do you like it? Do you not like it? We want to know. So you're going to see throughout this webinar today that it is broken up into segments. So our first segment is, where are we now? In this segment, this is where we're going to ask you to be vulnerable. We're going to talk a little bit about engage where you are with the topic, because the topic today is all about exploring courage. So what you're going to see is you're going to see a poll. Tara's going to put a poll out there for you with a couple of questions, and we want you to go ahead and answer those questions. So Tara, go ahead and launch that poll, please. And Nathan and I will be also participating in this poll, but we're going to do it verbally. So Tara, can you tell us what that first question is?
Yes, absolutely. So while you all are voting, Kim and Nathan, tell me, how often do you actively move outside of your comfort zone?
Ooh, that's a deep question. I would say that I try to do it yearly. I try to set a bucket list of volunteer opportunities and just getting out of my comfort zone. So I try to do it at least once a month in a year. What about you?
That's a lot, Nathan. I hardly step out of my comfort zone. I don't even like to gamble on anything. I am just straight by the book. The only time that I even step out of my comfort zone is if someone pushes me off the cliff to fly. So I am not one to step out of my comfort zone. I rarely do it.
Well, the poll says that most of our participants say sometimes. We've got about a 69-70% of sometimes, and then the rest are split pretty evenly. And I'd say that that's a good reflection that we try to step out of our comfort zone, but sometimes, it's a little more difficult than we plan. So tell me about question 2 then. How often do you allow fear to prevent you from doing something that you want to do?
Now, this is something I'm getting better at. I realized that the opposite of fear is courage. The opposite of courage is fear. And sometimes my fear will manifest as comfort. So if I don't want to jump into a new task or something new, I try to analyze it in that way. So I try to do better with embracing that fear.
Well, I'm definitely going to have to start hanging around you more. So hopefully that'll seep in, through me. But fear is something, and unfortunately, it stops me from doing a lot of things. I'm not a big risk taker. So I start to think about all of my mind goes straight to all the negative things that could happen. And I talk myself out of it. So if I do step out of my comfort zone once, then it's me not even thinking about it and just jumping and taking a leap of faith. So these are some good questions, Tara.
Yes, and the audience is right there with you. A lot of people are saying that they often find themselves allowing fear to prevent them because, like you said, a lot of times when you are worried about what could come of it, right? It feels like that fear outweighs what could, what could be great, right? So that was question 2. Now tell me what question 3. Do you feel that you are a courageous person, just in general?
Sometimes is my answer. Sometimes. What about you?
I would definitely say sometimes, only because I am one for my friends. Hey, I'm putting on the armor and I'm courageous for them and coming to their defense, or, pushing them to step out of their comfort zone. I'm like, you're going to let fear, stop you from doing what you were meant to do. And yet I can't even listen to my own advice. So does that make me a fraud, I guess? I don't know. But yes, I would say sometimes, I'm there for my friends, and occasionally I'm there for myself. But I would definitely say sometimes.
And our audience is right there with you. Sometimes has a large majority vote. And I think that that's a pretty fair evaluation. So thank you all for participating in our poll. And I see we have some wonderful questions in our chat. We will continuously today to talk about these questions and hopefully get those answered for you. But as of this poll, this is where we are now. Back to you guys.
Thank you, Tara. So we're excited about this topic about exploring courage, stepping outside of your comfort zone and your box. And, we want to talk about people that we've seen who have, been courageous. And it brings us to our next segment, which is Bonne Nouvelle. Now, for my Cajun and Creole French-speaking people, Bonne Nouvelle means good news. And so what we're going to talk about in this particular segment is, about people that we've seen or articles that we've read that talk about our particular topic, which is courage. So did you know that there's an award for courage?
No, I did not.
It's actually called the John F. Kennedy Profile in Courage Award. And someone from New Orleans actually received this award in 2021. So he was a grocery store owner in the Lower Ninth Ward, and his name is Burrell Colton. And what happened was during Ida, we didn't have any power in New Orleans. And so people needed food during that time. So what he was doing is giving out groceries and, taking in IOUs from his community. So he showed courage by, showing up for his community in their time of need. So Nathan, have you ever, either been courageous in the workplace or seen someone who was courageous?
Yes. So I would have to say that for Success Series in 2020, late 2020, I was approached to become a co-host. Now, somebody asking me to be a co-host of a webinar as big as this, I was extremely nervous and very fearful. And it wasn't, and that's why I think it's important for you to surround yourself with people who push you to be courageous. And had it not been for the conversations with you, I don't know if I would have been a co-host. So that's the one time I had to embrace that courage and tell fear to sit down and just be a co-host. And I'm here today and I love it.
I love what you said about you basically said I had to look fear in the eye and tell it to sit down, have a seat, fear, because you're not stopping me from doing what I want to do. And that is wonderful. So thank you so much for sharing that story, Nathan. And we want to talk more about being courageous. And so with this segment, that's some good news right there. And speaking of good news, have we got a treat for you? You guys are going to be so excited. Our next segment is the guest interview. And I know you're probably thinking, hey, well, who's the guest, Kim? Who is the guest? We can't wait. The guest that we have today, her name is Jennifer Schulke. Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, how are you?
Good. We're so excited that you're here today. And she's basically the equivalent of Brene Brown. Okay. Brene Brown is one of our favorites, and she's our Brene Brown for talent development. Let me tell you a little bit about Jennifer Schulke. So she is the workforce development supervisor in the talent development division at Louisiana State Civil Service. Jennifer and her team help agencies create learning organizations by helping to improve leadership pipelines, improve environments and cultures, and improve processes and practice to support learning and development. Jennifer holds a bachelor's degree in English and a master's degree in leadership and human resource development from LSU. And let me tell you guys, she's also the president of the Association for Talent Development, Baton Rouge. Please join me in welcoming Jennifer Schulke.
Thank you so much for having me. It was such an honor to be asked to be your first guest today. And it's just so nice to be able to connect with you guys in another arena, if you will.
Yes.
Now, Jennifer, thank you for being our guest. Kim had a brilliant bio. You have a lot of decorations. So what would you like our participants to know about you?
You know, this topic of courage, I've been studying courage in one way or another for about 20 years now. And I think along with that study, it becomes a fail forward mentality. I'm a risk taker and I encourage people to fail forward. So when I look back over my experiences, there's definitely been a theme that has emerged, and that's how do we help people create excellence or reach excellence? You know, you're hitting on fear and all of these roadblocks that we, you know, encounter on our journey of courage. And no matter if I'm working, started out in the middle school, talk about courage, but my experiences started out in the middle school. And what I've found in working with 10, 11-year-old kids and then transferring that knowledge into NFL camps and then higher education and now with adult education, there's a few principles that remain the same. One, people want to do good, right? They want to excel. They want to be validated in their approaches and say, hey, you're doing great. And I'm not talking about in that fake way, but that authentic, you're doing this right and you can improve in this area. So being honest and transparent with your feedback. And then finally, you know, it comes down to us as leaders, and it doesn't take a title to be a leader. It comes down to figuring out how to make other people motivated, not by throwing candy or stickers, but how do we create that intrinsic motivation? So no matter if it's a 10-year-old or a 90-year-old, the principles stay the same, right? We have to create predictable systems where people feel safe to engage. We've got to develop psychological security. We're hearing this term thrown around a lot, but when we talk about courage, the underlying things are shame and vulnerability. And for us to be courageous in the workplace or with other people, we have to build that trust, right?
Yeah.
So I'm really excited that more people are talking about trust and psychological security within organizations. And I think the final part of this is giving honest, transparent, relevant, and timely feedback. You know, we hear a lot, oh, that was great. Well, what was great, right?
Yeah.
How do I become more actionable within that? Because that's what's going to propel people forward and give them the courage to overcome some of these fears or boundaries that they're perceiving in their lives. So, you know,
And I agree, Jennifer, what you said about trust, because that is the foundation of being vulnerable, wanting to be vulnerable and being okay with being vulnerable. Is if you have that psychological safety and that trust established, then you're more inclined to, you know, put it all on the table.
Yeah, take that risk, really. That's what we're talking about. So, you know, as we go into this conversation, I think it's important that we are here to help people interpret setbacks, not as failure or internal failure, because, I mean, let's be honest, if you don't feel like you've been successful at something, you've automatically failed. I'm bad at something.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Right?
Yes.
And that's not true. You may have misstep in one area, but there's an opportunity for improvement. And so helping people reframe their thoughts, not that you were a failure, but okay, what can we move forward, right? And that's called developing a growth mindset. I think as adults, it's very easy to get set into one routine and we follow it. But that hinders our growth, right? That hinders our courage. So we've got to remain open and remain risk takers, as you spoke about.
And
I
I
like
love what
that.
you said about changing mindsets, because that's what it's about. You remember when I talked about earlier how I just go through all of the negative things on why I shouldn't jump in and have courage. And to me, that's that protecting
Yeah.
myself.
Mhm.
Something happens, I don't know what it is, but that's my way of protecting myself, so that one, I don't get let down, and two, I don't know what the second one is, but it has to be
It's
something
there.
else too. But it's about changing your mindset. And look, I'm jumping into it already.
I know.
And I'm just so excited about this topic, and I hope everyone's excited too. So I want to dive into our first question. So, when we talk about having courage in the workplace, what does that mean to you?
Well, you've already said it. I'm a huge Brene Brown fan. And, when she talks about courage, she immediately stops and redirects and really talks about what that definition is,
Mhm.
right? In modern society, we look at courage as, great strength in the face of pain or grief, or it's this grandiose act. And that's not originally what the word meant at all. The root word is from Latin, so for core, for the heart, right? And it means that you are willing to speak your mind from your heart, right?
Mhm.
And that is definitely a departure from how we've seen courage play out in TV and in media. But these conversations and matters of the heart are really what the foundation is as far as getting going in the workplace,
Mhm.
as far as building that ordinary courage where we're okay to be transparent with one another, where we're okay to share our feelings about an experience, right? Respectfully, of course. But I think a lot of times we just shut down, and we don't or aren't willing to share those true feelings. And so, when we're talking about courage, and I'll warn you now, this is getting into some of the psychology, right? We've got to understand why do we react the way that we do. And I think it's really important to realize that fear, those things that are keeping you back from courage, that's coming from those past experiences
Mhm.
that you've had. Right. So how you attribute success, that I'm great at what I do, I can conquer the world. Right. There's not a whole lot of us that can go out there and say in every aspect, I'm going to conquer the world. There is
Right.
some aspect of what we do where it's like, I don't feel good about that. And that simply comes from not having success in the past.
Mhm.
So when I talk about developing a growth mindset, that's really all we're doing is rewriting that story in our head, picking out small ways, not these grandiose life-saving, I'm running into a fire moments, but really just starting small and saying, hey, I wasn't comfortable with this. That one sentence is an example of something very small, but guess what? We start to experience success, and that courage becomes easier and easier and easier. And we don't put up those blocks because that's what we've experienced before.
Mhm.
So I think that's a big one. And then, when we start talking about vulnerability and matters of the heart and sharing our feelings, this isn't something that's accepted within the business world a lot. I think there's trends that are beginning to recognize it, especially, looking at the great resignation that's held on or that is happening.
Mhm.
Organizations are starting to look at their employees and what do they need. And one of those things is being transparent and being able and willing to speak that truth. But that's not there quite yet. It was interesting. We were working with a client on a competency model, and we were actually talking about the competency of courage. And one of the behavioral outcomes for courage was to be willing to be vulnerable. Right. And we've done all the research, we've hashed it out, we came up with the best definitions. And this woman brought up the fact, and it took a lot of courage for her to say this, because she was a woman of color in an executive position. And she stopped it right there and she said, I can't be vulnerable. I cannot be vulnerable because in my position, who I am, that's seen as a weakness, right? So even though we know the research says that we have to be vulnerable with one another, with our employees, organizational culture, whether it's real or perceived, doesn't always reward being vulnerable in a way. And so I think that's one of the big things that we really have to start paying attention to within our organizations is how are we rewarding people for being vulnerable, right? And again, I'm not talking about stickers or free Blue Jean Day or something like that, but on an honest level, taking the time to say, man, Kim, I know that was hard for you to say. Keep doing it. Keep doing it. I got your back, So I think it just brings up a lot of conversations about bias as well. The three of us sitting at this table, the messages that we've received regarding our ability to be courageous within organizations or in life, that's very different. Speaking for myself, it's I played softball at LSU and I keep going back to A League of Our Own, right? With Tom Hanks. And he says, there's no crying in baseball, right? And I think we're taught a lot in life to keep going no matter what. Even if you're hurting inside, even though you don't agree with something, you keep going, right? And it's time to start talking about how do we break those down? So I'm kind of interested to hear from you guys. Are there messages that you've received about courage, or is it okay to be vulnerable? I'll ask the audience that too. What messages have you received?
Yeah, Jennifer, thank you. So some really great examples of courage from something as, what we would think of as simple, right? Initiating a conversation. That can be extremely scary for some people, right? And so that demonstrates a lot of courage. And something Claire just said, she said for her, she felt like she only began to grow as a professional when she stopped feeling bad about being anxious. And striving not to be an anxious person, and then just started looking at the ways that it can be a strength, right? So taking things that are just a part of who you are and realizing it's okay and being encouraged to, to go through with that after. And I had a question earlier, actually.
I want to comment on that one really
Sure.
quickly. So Claire, thank you for bringing up that anxiety piece of it, because those inner thoughts, right? Those control what we do and how we go into
Yes, it does.
And a lot of times I feel like, and it's in the research, but a lot of this anxiety that we experience around courage or trying something new or being a risk taker, it really does come back to not only those experiences, but also looking at how we attribute the success of it and just retraining our brain. So thanks for bringing that up, Claire.
Yeah. And the reason why we had a question earlier, and I'm trying to see who shared it. It was from Shanda. Please excuse me if I mispronounce your name, but she said, how do you push past your fear? And I think this goes well with the conversation we're having right now.
Pushing back from the fear. I think we're going to hit on some practical steps that you can take. But again, I think it's recognizing your thought patterns. And I was going to mention this to Claire, but looking at that external validation. And what do I mean by external validation? In society, we are driven and believe many times that your self-worth is tied to getting the kudos. They liked what I turned in, and getting that feedback from other people. And once you start to change how you reward yourself, not by somebody else's standards, but by your own standards, it takes a lot of courage to ask for something. That's not major. That's not big, but being sound within your own decisions and rewarding yourself on that level, I think, is a great way to move past some of the anxiety that's going on. Truly.
what I love is two things. One that Tara said was in chat. When we think of courage, we think of some big grand gesture and we forget the small things. And it is about, even having a conversation, you deciding to do success series and putting
Mhm.
yourself out there. And, when I think about vulnerability in the workplace, that was always frowned upon, even
Yeah.
ever since I can remember. And it even goes back to even in your personal life when you were young, or I can only speak of myself, but when I was young, crying was, we were considered a crybaby and you weren't allowed to be vulnerable. And that transitioned to the workplace where you better not cry in front of your coworkers or your supervisor, they'll think you're weak. And so, that had been embedded from early on and carried into the workplace, which I think is for a lot of people.
Yeah. I
Mhm.
mean, we spend a lot of time masking who we are, which is exhausting.
Mhm.
I mean, it really is. So I guess this discussion is really about how do you take those masks off and be that authentic person. So
Right.
great point.
And we tend to not look at all of our emotions. We try to separate the strong emotions, the good ones from the bad. But when we embrace every single emotion, that's our superpower. That is who we are.
Yeah, it is.
When we embrace
Absolutely.
anxiety, whenever we embrace fear, we could be better. We're making ourselves better and we're growing.
Absolutely. I've got the book is Ask and It's Given. And it is a list and a hierarchy of feelings, right? At the bottom is just complete despair, overwhelm, frustrated. And the premise is wherever you are on that list, move one up.
Mm.
Just move one up. I'm not trying to go from despair to joy, but maybe just despair to I'm frustrated by this.
Mhm.
Now I'm just overwhelmed, right?
Yeah.
Until we can get to those levels that we're feeling better. But I think again, going back to those small steps and recognizing that one small step in the direction that you want to go is going to start that momentum and get you going in the right direction and help you experience success within that path.
Right. So Jennifer, so we've talked about what it means in regards to courage. How do we begin to change our organizational culture?
These are really, really big questions that we could spend all day talking about. And, as I was preparing for, our discussion today, I just kept going off on all these tangents and every single one of them is so important. But I did get it down to a list of about 5 things. And before we get into those 5 things, I want to say that it's everybody's responsibility to play a role within courage.
That's right.
Right? Because we know that courage is simply putting our shame to rest and being vulnerable with other people. Now, if I meet a stranger on the street, and they ask me a question, am I going to be able to be vulnerable with this person, honest, transparent? Maybe, but more than likely not. Let's be honest. There takes a relationship and that interpersonal connection for courage and vulnerability and shame and all of these things to even exist within an organization. So when I think about it, I do think that it comes down to leadership, being able to accept and know what courage looks like on an individual basis, because what courage looks like to me, I'm a risk taker, right? So I'm going to jump in and I'm going to run with something. We know that's not your case.
You would give me panic attacks.
I do give you panic attacks. I know I do. But recognizing that my level of courage is the exact same thing. It just looks different, right? And there's no one size fits all. And I think on the flip side of that, we've got to encourage employees to develop that courage, whether that is accepting critical feedback and having the self-awareness to know, ooh, I've had a past experience that this triggers.
Yeah.
I need to move beyond it. This person is giving me critical feedback because they care about me. They want to see me succeed, right? They're not just picking on you. No, it relates back to that mission and that goal, and believing that one, people want to do their best, and two, giving that feedback that helps people get to their highest potential.
Sarah?
Yeah, so we've got a great discussion going on in chat, and we're talking about that situation where it's a difficult situation when these conversations aren't had as often, and so vulnerability is not something talked about. So Jennifer and any of you, if you have any ideas for how what happens when you try to bring these conversations up, but then it appears like maybe you're being a little negative, or maybe you're complaining about the situation, when in reality you just want to start a conversation.
Well, again, when we talk about courage, you speaking your truth, that is going to elicit the same response from the person that you're trying to have that conversation with. Right? We're not comfortable with being honest. We're not comfortable with having these open, honest discussions. So I would not get discouraged. I would find some compassion for that person, and I would then turn that conversation into, man, I could tell that you weren't into it, or I may have said this the wrong way. I would go back to, how can I communicate this better? Right? Don't give up on that discussion, because we start telling ourselves what we want to hear. We create that narrative in our head that, oh, I did something wrong, or, I'm not good enough. And we go into these negative thought cycles, but really and truly, it's just as much about that other person. They may not know how to answer the question. Right? And they're working on the same skills of having courage and vulnerability. I know as a supervisor, it's very difficult sometimes. I think we, of a certain generation, we're taught to, you're always right. What I say is what is going to go. And we're moving out of that generation to more of the dialogue. And let me hear what you've got to say, and it not just be that one-way street.
And I like what you said, Jennifer, because it's not always a you problem. Sometimes bringing those vulnerable conversations, it's a them problem.
Yeah.
You might have to make someone comfortable to have those conversations.
Yeah.
Kind of set up the mood and set up the space for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to bring up Brene again. And in these vulnerable moments, she says that you protect yourself. Right. And you can see this. I encourage you all to start looking for these shields, but you're going to do one of three things. You're going to shut down, you're going to fight, or you're going to be the people pleaser. Right. Yeah. Those are our ways of dealing with conflict, shame, vulnerability. Yeah. Right. And so if you're seeing those shields come up, and that was a good example of somebody's shield coming up, they're also experiencing vulnerability, period. Those reactions are a response from past experiences, and the body, its first goal is to protect itself. Right. Yeah. And if it senses danger, yes, this conversation is not a bear charging at you trying to kill you, but in our brains, it doesn't know the difference, right? There's something called the amygdala that is that fight or flight. And we talk about it all the time, that even those performance discussions, it triggers the amygdala, and it's like, my boss is not a bear, but this could hurt. And we come into it trying to protect ourselves. So I would just look for those shields of people pleasing, pushing back, or just disappearing. If you're seeing those types of things, a discussion is warranted, and check in with that person. It comes down to making that personal connection. Gotcha. Not saying you weren't listening to me, but I care about you, and I care about our relationship, and I care about us being able to move forward. A lot of people stop in that space right there because it's not comfortable. Right. It's not comfortable. It's awkward. And there's this weird silence sometimes, but sit there in the silence.
Right.
Let it happen, because people are trying to formulate, what do they want to say? Don't take that silence as they don't like me. No, they're processing just like you are.
Right.
Exactly.
And Jennifer, on that subject, we've got a good question from Monica. It says, how do you change that fighting response? And, she says, every time she says she won't be triggered by that, right? But it continues to happen. So you have any suggestions on ways to change that fighting response?
I mean, my first response is I'm a huge proponent of mental health. And I have a fabulous therapist that has helped me work through some of this, because it really does go back to those past experiences. And if you're noticing a pattern of being triggered over and over and over again, there's something behind that, right? And we have to ask, why am I being triggered?
Yeah.
I mean, it is a chemical response in your brain. We took a fabulous training one time, and it listed all of the ways that your brain could be hacked, right? And one of them was not belonging, right? Not fitting in, being pushed off. I don't remember if y'all remember that training. It was in the middle of the pandemic, but I would start to explore, what are those feelings that are triggered by that experience? Is it disgust? Is it whatever it is? And then start unpacking that a little bit. That's a tough one.
It is. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, Jennifer. So my next question is, why do you think it's important for us to encourage courageous behavior in the workplace?
This one's huge. I think we are all aware of the Great Resignation.
Yeah.
We've had over 24 million workers exit the system. And this goes back to retention, really and truly. By encouraging courage, again, we're building trust, and we know that people are going to do the best, put forth the most effort for people that they trust.
Right.
Right. If you were struggling to get a task done on your job, who's the first person that you're going to go to a lot of times? Probably not your supervisor. You're going to go to a friend,
Right.
right? A peer, and say, hey, how do you do this? Do you know anything about it? Why is that? Because of the
we have
trust, because of that relationship
Mhm.
that is built. And by the way, 80% of learning happens in those conversations. So they're super important. Whole nother podcast, but it's huge. There was a research study done in 2017, and this group found that with increased trust, courage goes along with that. Stress was reduced by 13%. That's huge.
Wow.
So 13% less sick days. Think about all the ways that stress plays out in your life, right? Going home, going to sleep, not engaging with your family, not having that work balance. So trust reduced that stress. The second thing that they found was that there was a 76% increase of engagement. Yeah, if I trust somebody, I want to do well by them. I want to reach that excellence, so think about that bottom line. Think about what can be accomplished if you had 76% more engagement. We know across the nation, studies have shown that employee engagement sits around 35% to 45%. Across the nation. We've got a real engagement problem, right? So looking at that trust and that courage is a huge piece. And the last one is the most important, discretionary effort. And do you know what I'm talking about when I say discretionary effort?
No.
Anybody? Oh, yes, learning. Discretionary effort is the effort that you are willing to put forward in your work. Not being told to do A, B, and C, but seeing that something could be improved. I think y'all are great on the discretionary work. I think the both of you and our team in general, they're always looking for ways to improve. You're not waiting on leadership to say, do A, B, and C. You care about our products. You care about the services that we put out there. And that's the discretionary effort. We excel in this area. We really do. But I think that's really attributed to the relationships and the trust that we've been able to build. So, if you don't remember anything else, it's that courage, encouraging courage, developing that trust. It's a huge retention tool. people coming into the workplace now, they want to know that they matter, that they are cared for, and that they're going to be developed to give back to something larger than themselves. So
Right.
great question.
We have one more question for you, Jennifer. This is our last question. If someone's watching says, I don't have courage or I couldn't do something bold, what advice would you give them to help them develop that skill and feel more comfortable using it?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Sure can. So if someone out there
Mhm.
or me, I'm that person. They say, I don't have courage or I couldn't do something bold. What advice would you give them to help them develop that skill and feel more comfortable using it?
Well, Kim, I tell you, you're being hard on yourself because there are so many amazing things about you. But really and truly, it does start with changing that inner dialogue. I mean, if you could have like a little counter ticker and keep track of all of the negative thoughts that come into your head on a daily basis, I think we'd all be shocked
I'd be
at
embarrassed.
what we tell ourselves, right?
Mhm.
I can't remember the movie where everybody can see what he's saying. It's like, ooh, no, I don't want to do that.
Right.
Right.
But your thoughts are your reality.
Mhm.
And we know that because of our shields, because we try to protect ourselves, we make up this inner dialogue that a lot of times is so far from reality, it's not even close to true.
Mhm.
But we internalize it and we believe it because of those past experiences. So, if you can't do something and you think you can't do something, then you just won't. You won't. Right.
Mhm.
So even a modicum of let me just try this
Yeah.
is a great way to do it. And I've heard both of you saying, I've just got to put fear to bed. I know that this is fake. This is fake talk, and move past it. I would say the other thing is starting small.
Yes.
Again, we really subscribe to this thought that courage is associated with heroism, jumping into the fire, changing a whole organization, being that mover and shaker. But it really and truly does maybe start with, I'm shy. I'm going to make sure that I say hi to 3 people in the morning.
Yeah.
Right.
That's courage.
Right.
Somebody asks you, how are you doing today? Instead of the standard response, I'm great. I'd like to talk about that. Come find me in a second. I need to talk. That's being authentic.
Yeah.
So I think just starting small is a great way to kind of put that fear monster at bay, and we're not taking over the world, but I can do small things that are within things that I can control.
Mhm.
I think a lot of courage stops when it gets outside of your control.
Yeah.
But within that control, it's kind of like courage is kind of like a muscle. And I think you've experienced this, but if you don't practice it, if you don't use it, it goes away. I mean, y'all spoke about doing the
Yeah.
success series. That's kind of scary proposition, right? But as we were talking about it, you're like, we got this now.
Mhm.
That same fear does not exist. So you've really been able to shift and get outside of your comfort zone with that.
Yeah.
Got 2 more. And, I have to credit my mother for these because I would go into cycles, and we've talked about this, Kim. And when I would get into just these negative cycles, she was like, stop. Write down your strengths. What are you good at? Write down all of the things that you are grateful for, that you can show gratitude towards. And within that area, that's your comfort zone. That's where you can start to say, okay, what does courage look like within my strengths? Because getting out of that box, that can be hard, but let's build on those strengths. And then finally, looking at that list, if you were to take that step in courage, whatever it looked like, what is the worst case scenario? more than likely it's not going to end up in death or, being kicked out of the community or, anything like that. But in our heads, again, it's kind of like Chicken Little, the
Yeah.
sky's falling, everything's terrible. I know my mom would make me write these lists. And once I got them onto paper, it was two things, but I was a mess,
Mhm.
and I didn't have the words or the courage to even talk about it until it was down on paper. So, those are short things, but if nothing else, put it to rest. Put
like that.
that fear to rest. And
Mhm.
a good exercise with that is I'm feeling vulnerable about blank. And I'm so grateful for blank.
Mhm.
That's going to get you out of what Pranay calls those vulnerability shutters, right? We get vulnerable and then we tend to shut down.
Mhm.
Right.
But following up
Yeah.
that vulnerability with something that you're grateful for, it flips your thinking.
Mhm. Well, I love what you said in regards to starting off small, because I do find when I am pushed off the cliff that once I get over it, I'm like, oh, it wasn't that bad.
No,
What was I even nervous about?
no.
It wasn't that bad at all.
Yeah. That was just my perfectionism talking.
Yeah, that's basically what it was. That's basically what it was.
It is
And
true.
I love what you said about writing down your fears, because a lot of
Mhm.
times it could be two things and we make it seem like it's a million.
Yeah.
And once we read it, we're like, oh, it's just two things. And I doubt that'll ever happen.
Mhm. Absolutely. I mean, I'm guilty of it. I study all these things. I know how to motivate people. And you were talking about you can be a cheerleader for other people, but it's hard. I mean, last night I'm like panicked and I had to stop and use these same things on not really panic, but
Mhm.
I felt myself getting into those vulnerability shutters,
Yeah.
and it's like, you have to stop and you have to look at, okay, I'm surrounded by A, B, and C that are going to be
Mhm.
successful. And you've got to shut it down. Shut it down.
Right. Well, Jennifer, we really appreciate
Yeah.
you stopping by and giving us some tips and strategies to help give us courage. And I told you guys that she was amazing. I
Yes.
told you that she was amazing. And thank you for inserting your questions in chat. So, Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah,
Thank you for
Jennifer.
having me, and good luck to you in your courage journey.
Thank you. What I really loved about our conversation with Jennifer is that, when she talked about, starting off small,
Mhm.
breaking it down into those pieces, because I mean, I don't know about you, but now I feel like I should do what you talked about and making it a point to step out of my comfort zone. At least I'm not going to do what you said, a week.
Yes.
No, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to start small and I'm going to, step out of my comfort zone once a month.
Yeah, I like that too, starting off small, because we always think of a courageous act as being so big.
We do.
And it could be just showing up, just doing the best that we can. We're being courageous. Not everyone has to know that we're being courageous.
Mhm.
We could just do it and show up.
That's right. That's right. And I hope that you guys found this conversation as beneficial as we did. And now it brings us to our next segment. And some of you are already familiar with this new segment. It is called the Success Series Salute. And let me tell you, we asked for your nominations, and boy, did you guys come through.
Yes.
We had a lot of nominations, and it was really hard to narrow it down. So thank you, and keep those coming. So Tara is going to share the Success Series Salute recipients.
All right, everyone. Well, thank you again. Just like Kim said, we were blown away by the several nominations that we had. And, we have a lot of employees across the state who go above and beyond every day. So these are just a few that I want to share, but man, are they some really outstanding employees. So let's start with Joette Smith. Joette Smith is from the Louisiana Department of Health in the Medicaid division, and she is responsible for handling requests for assistance from members of the 5 LDH Medicaid Managed Care Organizational Health Plans. They call these MCO. So many times Ms. Joette has to deal with or assist customers that may not be may not be so happy, right? They get frustrated for a variety of reasons, fairly so, but it can be difficult. So she does a wonderful job mitigating those experiences and staying with those customers from beginning to end, instead of what she easily could do, which is pass any of the requests or complaints along for handling to their MCO. Instead, she makes sure to follow through and follow up and make sure that every request is heard and every customer is taken care of. And for almost 10 years, her nominator has worked with her and said that without fail, Miss Joette is professional. She is calm, kind, and empathetic towards members and coworkers alike. So she is amazing and continues to be an outstanding customer service representative for her agency. So thank you, Joette. And then we have Nancy Brown. So Nancy Brown is a director of nursing at the Pinecrest Supports and Services Center. Now, Nancy has gone above and beyond in a short time in her position. So since she's been there, she has been transparent with her department goals and their shortcomings. She's ensured that each nurse and each employee in their station has all of their functioning equipment that they need, make sure that they are not needing anything, that they have what they need to continue to provide great service. She's also added monthly Zoom meetings to keep everyone up to date with important information, as well as a yearly team building conference. And last year, they said that the nurses loved it, and they are so looking forward to the one coming this year. She is quick to act when there is an area that could be improved on. And whenever they are short-staffed, she does not hesitate to schedule herself in and step alongside with her nurses and do their work as well to help them function as well as possible. She makes sure that she leads by example and is not afraid to get in there and help when help is needed. So in the short time that she's been the director of nursing, she makes sure that everyone, again, has what they need, and she is there to help when needed. She's implemented creative solutions to their clients and continues to give the great care that they deserve. So thank you, Nancy, for that. And finally, we have Dr. Navia Nair. She is a gynecologic oncologist at LSU Health Sciences Center in New Orleans. Now, Nancy is a fierce advocate for her patients, and she's unafraid to be an agent of change to get them what they need. So an example of that is last year, she had a patient who experienced a recurrence of her ovarian cancer. Now the patient was a candidate for treatment that would almost certainly work, but they found that she was allergic to this treatment. Now there is another treatment that is more rare, and it is well-described protocol called carboplatin desensitization, which allows patients who are allergic to chemotherapy to continue to receive the treatment that they need. Now, it requires multidisciplinary expertise and adherence to rigorous safety protocols, and it's not cheap, okay? This is an expensive procedure and an expensive protocol, and it's not the easiest to gain access to. So prior to that patient, their university medical center did not have this available. And in fact, only one private practice did in New Orleans. So functionally, that means that women who were underinsured or who relied on free healthcare mechanisms from the state would not have access to this procedure. So Dr. Nair was able to appeal her colleagues and did not take no for an answer. She was able to push protocol through and administered the first carboplatin desensitization treatment at the University Medical Center in New Orleans. And by her advocating for this and pushing through this, many women in the future with ovarian cancer will benefit from her efforts. So that is just another amazing way that Dr. Navia Nair has shown that she's gone above and beyond for her patients and those that she serves. So thank you to Dr. Nair, Joette, and Nancy for your amazing contributions going above and beyond for every citizen. I'm so sorry. Every citizen every day. Thank you guys. And please keep those nominations coming. We love to hear your contributions all day. Now, for our final segment, we have some final closing thoughts of the day. I've been listening to you all talking about courage all day long. And we've had some wonderful contributions in the chat. You all are really digging into this topic. And I will say that, you know, through this conversation, I think courage is about being brave even when fear is involved. It's about being willing to do the smallest step just to break that comfort and get comfortable with being uncomfortable. So that way you can push past that and start to utilize that comfort skill, like, or I'm sorry, that courage skill, like you've been noticing or been discussing, right? So I want to hear from you all in the chat if you want to share your final thoughts on courage. And Kim and Nathan, what are you, any last words you'd like to say?
I just want to say again, I really missed our conversations and our discussions. And Jennifer provided us with some great tools to show courage. And let's just do the best we can. Courage is a journey. We could take those small steps. I'll be with you guys. Let's just be the best at be the best at showing courage like we can.
And just remember, don't overthink it. Don't be an overthinker like me. Start off small and just, you know, push through your discomfort, because in the end, you're going to realize, hey, it wasn't so bad. When I told this person hi, it wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. And just keep on continuing to grow. We really appreciate you guys joining us this afternoon, and we hope you enjoyed our new format. Please, in chat, let us know what you think. Do you like the new format? And I already know that you guys are like, oh, that was an amazing guest, Kim, Nathan, and Tara. We love her. We want her back. And again, we'd like to say thank you to Jennifer Schuelke for bestowing her courage, knowledge onto us. So with that being said, you guys, look how it's come to the end of the road. I know you guys are thinking, we want more, and we have more for you on June 14th. Please join us as we talk about finding your niche, okay? With that being said, if you want to rewatch this, if you want to show your friends, please find us on YouTube as well as Leo. You know, we are everywhere. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. We hope that you enjoyed it. And please remember to keep on learning. Bye.
Bye, everyone.